Last time I have mentioned that assuming work with same intensity, same difficulty is producing same amount of value, workers will basically go to the sectors where they are exploited less. Assuming again, as a second thing, workers have same labor mobility. So in that case, the exploitation rate of workers in three different sectors will be exactly the same. And if we assume some workers are more productive, we might also assume that, the productive workers might also want to be exploited less, so they might also be equally shared by all sectors. Because if once in one sector they are exploited less, they will go to that sector basically. So in a way, because of that, we assume the exploitation rate between the exploitation rate in three sectors will be the same. And basically the value created by the workers in sector 1 is 200, in sector 2 240, and in sector 3 160. But from the perspective of the capitalists, the value they pay for the workers is 100 in sector 1, 120 in sector 2, and 180 in sector 3. Well, in some cases, there might be barriers between sectors that workers might not be easily moved from one sector to another. And that case is a case we will study in future. We will see what will happen in that case. Actually, we will international trade part is the part where we will study, where we will also look to international labor mobility, where such a case might actually materialize, basically. But once we analyze that possibility, that analysis is true for any kind of labor mobility restriction. And at the end of this lecture, I will also briefly mention that possibility. But assuming exploitation rates are the same and there is no capital mobility between the sectors, if the value of constant capital is 100, value of variable capital is 100, surplus value with 100% exploitation rate will be necessarily 100. Again, if constant capital is 80, variable capital is 120, the surplus value is 120. Constant capital, if constant capital is 180, variable capital is 80, the surplus value will be 80, basically. So profit is S, surplus value, that's the amount that is earned, divided by V plus C. That's the value of capital that is used by each sector. Note that C plus V in each sector is 200, same. But the surplus value is different in each sector. So in this case, sector 1 will have average profits. So we'll divide S to C plus V. Well, this sector has a lot of variable capital, not that much constant capital, and having more variable capital does mean to have more surplus value, so profit will be higher, 60%. This is 50%. It is not in percentage, but I think you can see how we can turn this to percentage. If you really want, you can multiply it with hundreds. This is in percentage, basically. And the last one is basically 40%. So, if there is no capital mobility, the profits will be distributed this way. What will happen when we have capital mobility? If we have capital mobility, in that case, basically, the sectors that have relatively higher profit rate will attract capital. So the companies will rather invest in sectors that have more profit. So sector 2 will be the sector in which many sectors will invest. And sector 3, since it has less capital, less profit rate, it will be a sector in which the companies they would not like to invest as much, basically. So capital will move from sector 2 and sector 3 and sector 1 to sector 2 and sector 1. I mean, sector 1 is average. I mean, some capital might move to sector 2, but some capital might move from it to sector 2, and some capital might move to it from sector 3. What will happen? Well, this movement will stop when profit is same in all sectors. So that means profit rate will be same in all sectors. So just like the exploitation rate, which has to be same in all sectors because of the labor mobility, which is 100%. Profit rate also needs to be same. These are both in percentages. So profit, in order to calculate profit rate, we need to calculate the sector-wide constant capital. So the total constant capital in all sectors together. So for that, we need to add constant capital values in all sectors. Similarly, we find the variable capital for all sectors, economy-wide variable capital, and economy-wide surplus value. The calculation of the profit rate will be the same. We divide total surplus value to the sum of total constant capital plus total variable capital in all sectors. So it is 50%. So profit rate is the same in all sectors. The profit amount, however, doesn't need to be same. It is same here, basically, because the profit amount will be proportional to the total capital amount that is spent in all sectors. So if basically in sector 1 200 units of capital is spent, the profit will be 50% of the capital that is used, which is this amount, 100, basically 50% of 200. I mean, C plus V is here in this case 200, and 50% of it is 100. So the profit will be in all cases 100. So let me actually, oh, there's a problem here, but I will solve it. Of course, this will be same. So you need to put dollar signs, basically. If you do that, then that cell will be fixed. So profit amount is basically 100 in this case. By the way, exchange value of the commodities are C plus V plus S for the, of course, outputs of these sectors. And these are the profits, but when we calculate actual price of these sectors, basically, well, as you see, the exchange values are different. They are different because even though C plus V is same in all cases, S is different in all cases also, which deviates the exchange values. However, since the profits are same, well, when we calculate the price, basically, we first take into account costs of the companies, which is in this case C plus V, but then we add the profit of the company to get the final price. So in this case, basically, since the profits are equally distributed between the sectors, because capital that is spent in each sector is the same, the price level is the same, basically. Just for fun, I mean, if I move this, make this 50 and 50, as you see, the profit will be less, 60 actually. Why? Because now the total capital spent is not anymore 200 but 100 in the sector. So capital is distributed with respect to the amount of capital that is spent in each sector. It's not that automatically equally distributed. That's one thing we should note. So this is how, this is basically the Marxian price theory in its, well, most simplest, in simplest possible way presented, let me say. Of course, there is much more we should talk on this price theory, so we will go beyond the simplest presentation. But basically, as you can see, we can, well, the basic way we find prices according to Marxian price theory is this. Well, now the profits are different from the surplus values, and prices are different from the exchange values. So what can we make of this price theory, and where does the exploitation rate and the surplus value play a part in this framework? I mean, do we have any other important role for them? Well, at first, of course, exchange value is still the labor cost and the social cost according to Marxian theory. But what is its function? I mean, how does it affect the all-day numbers we see? Now, we will discuss first what does this Marxian price theory says for the individual sectors, and what does it say on the overall profit rate of the system. And of course, we will see everything we have seen up to this point also in analyzing the economic system in the coming part, where you will see how we can use those concepts to understand basic economic trends, basically. Now, first, I will introduce you to a new concept. That concept is called organic composition of capital. It is a concept similar to the capital intensiveness or labor intensiveness of the sectors, but Marx gives it name. Marx defines this using this concept, basically. Organic composition of capital is basically, mathematical sense, constant capital divided to the variable capital. The sectors with high organic composition of capital are the sectors where constant capital is relatively more common, and variable capital is relatively less common. These are the sectors commonly known in mainstream economics as the capital-intensive sector. I mean, where you have less labor and more other inputs, which might be large machines also, or chemical inputs maybe. And if a sector has low C over V, that means it has a low organic composition of capital. These are the sectors where V is labor is more common. Labor-intensive sector. These are labor-intensive sectors. And if the organic composition of capital is more or less similar to the economic average, then those sectors have average organic composition of capital. We will talk more on this in the next part.